Alrighty, we're going to answer, which is probably not a burning question for most people, but in the back of their mind, it seems like everyone has always kind of wanted to make lobster sauce because there's something exotic and expensive and rich about the concept of a lobster sauce served with anything. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you a version of how to make lobster sauce, and I'm going to be using and referring in my mind to the classic old French dish called lobster à l'américaine, which is in dedication to America, actually, and in remembrance of course. As in all of the things in the old style of cooking that have a la in front of another noun that's used after the name of the item that's being cooked, it means in remembrance of or in dedication to. So lobster à l'américaine is a dish that we're going to use, like I said, as a reference tool to make this lobster sauce. But lobster Americana is not a lobster sauce in itself. It's a lobster dish where the lobster is sauteed, white wine, brandy is burnt, shallots, fresh tomato, garlic, parsley. Basically, in a nutshell, that is lobster Americana, and maybe a little bit of reduced brown juice added to the lobster sauce as it's made in the saute pan. But in that particular dish, the lobster is served as the main dish. In this particular case, we're going to make sauce out of the same kind of concept. So instead of adding a 6 or 8 pound fresh lobster tail to the saute pan to make the lobster Americane, we're going to mince the lobster and add it to the same combination of ingredients and then puree the mixture, put it back into the saucepan, and then chop some fresh lobster for garnish in the sauce. That's the road that I'm going to take you down. Of the many roads that you can go down to make lobster sauce, I think this would probably be the most classic version, okay? So we're going to begin by heating up the saute pan, and we have 2 fresh 6-ounce lobster, Maine lobster tails, which, of course, Maine lobster being the best lobster in the world, according to the Europeans. Okay, certainly we want to use the Americans' opinion about that, you know? So we're going to split, take the meat out, and we're going to dice the meat up. And I think we're going to be able to make this entire lobster sauce from start to finish in front of you with no time elapsed video whatsoever. Then it'll give you a good sense in real time of how long it takes to make the sauce. We're going to add a pinch of butter first to the saute pan. And we're going to slice up the shallot. I think we have enough right there. We'll put the shallot in the pan. And we'll mince up the the lobster. And I have a little bit of fresh hot tomato concass, which is good, and I also have some fresh tomato, and I'm going to use the fresh tomato at the end of the sauce for garnish, but we're going to use this as part of the base that we're going to use for during the pureeing process of this dish, of the sauce. Okay. This should not take very long to make because this is a fresh lobster sauce. Now, be aware and be cognizant of the fact that lobster sauces that are made with lobster shell stock, whereby people take lobster shells and sometimes roast them or don't roast them and simmer them in water, sometimes overnight or sometimes for 6 to 10 hours, and reduce that stock and call that lobster stock. This is not really lobster stock. This is lobster shell stock, which has a different flavor than lobster meat, okay? And we're going to put a little bit of dried leaf thyme. And we are going to put a little bit of pepper. And we are going to flame some brandy directly into this pan first. There we go. We're going to burn the brandy. That means we're going to burn off the alcohol, and all that's left in that pan then is that concentrated aged white wine, which is what brandy is. We don't want it to taste boozy. And now we're going to add the garlic. We're doing it now because we didn't want to add it before for fear of possibly burning the garlic when we flame the brandy, okay? So, saute the garlic for a second. Now we're going to throw a little bit of white wine on here, and we're going to reduce that down. That's good. And we're going to add now some of the tomato concass, which is basically tomato, white wine, garlic, olive oil. Again, this is one way of making lobster sauce. One could make mirepoix and garlic and white wine and reduce that with white stock and lobster and puree that. Very similar to a lobster bisque, only then straining it through a fine sieve and making it more concentrated than the soup would be. Remember, sauce is always more concentrated per ounce than soup because so much less of it is used per bite being matched with the food that it's being eaten with, okay? Okay, the white wine's been reduced. Now we're going to add a little bit of white stock to this. Not too much. And we are going to get ready to move this into the food processor. Meanwhile, we're going to get the lobster garnish ready for this sauce, which is this other 6-ounce lobster tail that we're going to lightly saute in some butter in another pan here. This is, of course, a very expensive version of making lobster sauce, but if you want the richness of lobster sauce, you're going to have to spend the money in some cases, okay? You certainly can use frozen lobster meat to reach the same conclusion, pretty much. So over in this pan, we're going to heat this up, and we're going to add a little butter, and we're going to saute the lobster that we're ultimately going to be using as the garnish for the sauce, okay? Now remember, after we saute the lobster for the garnish for the sauce, we can chop it to make it smaller. So it doesn't matter specifically what size the lobster meat is at this stage, as long as it's cookable. Because you can always chop it smaller before you put it in the sauce. Okay, this sauce, I am satisfied, is ready to be pureed down here, okay? So we're going to take the most of the food only and put it into the food processor. Oh, let's put it all in there. Looks like we have enough in there. I was afraid we might have too much liquid, but I saw as we put it in that we didn't. That sometimes you start the machine, and if you have too much liquid, it flies everywhere. And I wanted to avoid that, so. You can use your portable blender stick or your stand-up bar blender also at this stage to make this. Here we go. Pulse. Then we have a small saucepan here that we're going to put the lobster puree sauce into to finish off. I think that's probably enough. Let's take a peek. Okay, let's put this in here. Let's put this on the stove. I think just for the sake of reducing it faster, so we don't even have to do any time elapsed cooking in this particular lesson, let's put this back in the saute pan because it will reduce faster. Now there's all kinds of things that you can do to this stage of the sauce. That would include things like adding fresh tarragon, thyme, and herbs, adding cream, adding more concass, adding mushrooms, using this as a combination, using this as a base for shrimp and scallop ragu, if you will, served with noodles or whatever. This is a good basic lobster type flavor sauce that one could use variably, you know.